The first Etsy things I put out are terrible, and I look at them and I just laugh. I put something out the other day and it had an error, like in the listing image, a typo. And luckily, one of my customers like pointed it out to me. I was like, oh, thank you. I was like, that's embarrassing, but I'm like, you know what? It didn't stop me from making money. And so I think I want to share that with people because it's like, even I mess up. Like, you do not have to be perfect. You just have to put it out there.
Did you hear that? All you perfectionists out there? Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works. I gotta admit, I am a recovering perfectionist. Although my business partner has told me that he doesn't see a whole lot of recovering happening, but I am trying. Today's guest didn't wait until she felt totally prepared, totally self-assured, and that everything was perfect prior to uploading her first digital product. Instead, Rachel Jimenez went ahead and launched her Etsy shop. Eventually, as she increased her offerings and really started to analyze the data on what was working and what wasn't, she was able to quit her full-time job after 9 months, went on to make $160,000 that year, and she hasn't looked back. While you will gain a better understanding of what it takes to launch and run a successful Etsy shop, the insights she shares about that, about mindset, her perspective on what people call failures, and the big why that drives her actions can be applied to increase revenue in any side hustle you're involved with. And you may also be inspired to see a way to retire earlier than you thought possible. And if you're finding it hard to carve out time for your side hustle, you're going to love what I'm calling her 5-minute strategy. It's smart, simple, and it works. Be sure to catch the end of episode takeaway, where I hope my competitive bodybuilding experience will motivate you to double down on your commitment to your side hustle. Now here is my conversation with Etsy superstar, Rachel Jimenez. Well, welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Well, when you started your Etsy store, you were working full-time, were you?
Yeah, I was working full-time at Claremont Graduate University. I was the director of alumni engagement there.
And how long were you doing that for?
I think it was about 6 years. At the time I started my Etsy store, I think it was around 5, 4.5 or 5.
I would imagine you had your hands full doing that job. What made you think, hey, I want to add a side hustle?
So I've always been interested in side hustles. I studied business. So I have my MBA and I started my career working at a women's business center. So I was always around workshops and teaching workshops about business. And that's always just been a passion of mine. And then I'm also part of the Financial Independence Retire Early community. So my husband and I are on the path to be able to retire by the age of 40 is the goal. Now that we have side hustles and we have fun with that, it's kind of like, okay, we want to have a certain level of net worth by that age, but we can see ourselves just having fun and making money after that and just doing whatever we want. But I think part of that, being part of that community, it's always trying to find ways to optimize your finances and make more if you can so that you can shorten that working life a little bit.
And what was the name of that organization?
So it's more of like, they call it like it's not a cult, but it's kind of a movement, I guess I would say. So it's the FIRE movement, which stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. Right. So it's basically people that want to save usually extreme amounts of income, so up to 50% of their take-home pay in the stock market, basically, or other types of investments. Some people do real estate investing. Some people do business, starting businesses, buying businesses. Some people do all of those. And so you just try to maximize your wealth so you don't have to work a traditional 9 to 5 until you're 67 and traditional retirement age.
And many of us grew up with that idea of go to school, get a good job, get a degree, get a good job, work forever, retire at 65. Mm-hmm. Do you remember what caused you to stumble across another way?
I can give you some. So my dad got laid off during like the 2008 time period. And so I think that for me it was just like, oh, you think of, and he had worked at the same company for like 20 years. So I think the traditional thought was like, you work at a company for a very long time, you get a pension, and then you kind of retire off into the sunset and enjoy the rest of your life. And then I saw that when I was just beginning my career. I was still in college at that time, but that happened. And I was like, oh, wow, like this traditional path where your company takes care of you doesn't really seem to be that way. Like you don't you can get laid off at any time, and there's not that security that I think a lot of people put behind a job isn't really there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was studying entrepreneurship, and it's like the rich dad poor dad, one of my best friend's dads, who was a mentor of mine, he was a business owner, and he seemed to just have more fun with his life, and he had more money, and I was like, that seems like a better path a little bit to me. So I think those kind of early experiences happened. And then Mr. Money Mustache is kind of one of the traditional founders, I would say, of the more modern FIRE movement. There's some people, Vicki Robbins is one of them, that wrote a book many years ago that preceded him, but he kind of helped it go viral a few years ago. And he retired on very little money. And so he wrote an article, which I still recommend people read. I think it's called The Shockingly Simple Math to Early Retirement. So if you type that in and then put Mr. Money Mustache in Google, it will come up. And there's some links within that article that kind of help you go deeper, but it really maps out the math behind what it actually takes. And I think at first people are like 50%, that's insane. But if you have a budget, which my husband and I had created, and then as you start getting raises, instead of spending that money, you just stop and kind of live the same lifestyle that you have, or even cut back a little bit, not on things like we still love to travel. We don't cut back on things that are important to us. We just cut back on things that aren't. And so like right now I drive a 2009 Honda Civic. That was my car that I bought when I was in college, and we still have that. Right. And so I have friends, we could afford a more expensive car. And I have friends that lease their cars and they change them every couple of years, and they're expensive cars. And to me, that's throwing money away, because I don't value that. If you value cars, like, I'm not about judgment. It's just, I value my time, and I'd rather retire early and go travel the world with my family. And if you want to retire at 60 and always drive a nice car, that's on you. I think finance is personal, and so you can make your own goals. But I think a lot of people just see the shiny object and the marketing that is on the TV, and they're like, oh, I want that. And they don't ever even realize that there's this other side, and they could have really anything they wanted. They probably just can't have everything they want. And so they have to make trade-offs. And so that's what my husband and I have done, and it's changed our lives.
Absolutely. And that is so wise and I think you alluded to it or nailed it really early on when you said you and your husband had a goal of retiring at 40. Mm-hmm. Because then what happens is these decisions come up. I've got to replace my car. Mm-hmm. Because of that goal, you aren't giving up this year's model. You're trading something of a lower nature to receive something of a higher nature. Mm-hmm. That car that you mentioned you've got, that's perfectly drivable. And making that choice, I'm going to be able to retire at 40. Mm-hmm. Versus, like you said, your friends leasing every year or 3 years.
Exactly. And I think some people, they hear budget and they think it's a dirty word, because they feel there's a scarcity mindset and this restriction, and they just think about all the negative stuff that has to happen, and they don't look on the bright side. And so there's a push and pull. There's both sides of everything. And so it's like, maybe you have a different car, but you're sitting on this pile of cash that most people don't know. And I think that gives you more confidence too, because like, you could drive somewhere and people could judge you, right? Like, they could look at you and be like, oh, well, what kind of car are you driving? And there's groups of people and types of places that you can go where you might get that judgment. And so if I can see, like, if you are in debt and you're driving a car like that, it might feel embarrassing and your ego might be injured a little bit. But if, on the other hand, you're reaching towards a bigger goal and you know you have a lot of cash, it's like, you don't care what those people think, because you're like, oh, you know, in the back of your head, and you can say these things to make yourself feel better. Like, yeah, I'm driving this car, but you don't know when I'm going to retire. And like, I'll be laughing in the Bahamas when I'm 40. Well, you'll be working, like, grinding out a 9-to-5 job. Right. You don't say those to those people, but it can make you feel a little bit better if somebody's making fun of your car or something like that.
And that was laid out so beautifully in Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
That mindset. And the other thing that you mentioned, and one of my very first careers was in banking. And for a part of that, I was a lender. Mm-hmm. And to your point about people getting a raise and then increasing their debts, buying the bigger car, the bigger house. I remember there was this guy that he came in and he said, I don't understand it, Joan. He said, every year I get a raise, but my debt level keeps going up. Mm. So he was in the habit of spending everything that came in, actually more. And that's why he was in for a consolidation loan. Mm-hmm. So good for you, again, to have that awareness and probably teach that awareness. I'm going to get to that a little bit later. And so I guess at that point, then you were looking at what other things can I do to bring in income, and you landed on the Etsy idea?
Yeah. So I started with a bunch of things. I worked at the Women's Business Center. So I partnered with them and did a course with them. it was like a 90-day business challenge, and I'd done a budgeting course. And honestly, a lot of it, like I would do the course and that was fun, but then marketing it and putting myself out there was scary. And so I would kind of step back. And then I did dog sitting through Dog Vacay. I think Rover bought them. So that actually did really well. And so I kind of saw the power of a platform. So before, when I did courses or these other types, trying to do consulting, it takes a lot of time to market yourself. And I didn't necessarily have those skills or the confidence I needed to do that.
Okay.
And then Rover, there was a platform. So literally all I did was like, I have a home, I have an asset, a resource, I have some free time, I have a fenced backyard. So I was like, let me just write like some copy and say, hey, I'm Rachel. I do dog sitting. If you want to like drop your dog off here instead of at the vet, and you're cheaper than the vet usually. And then they actually get like a nice person that will cuddle with them and let them come in the house as opposed to being in a kennel or something like that. And so that started to do really well. And it was so easy. People would just come to my house. We'd do like a quick meet and greet, introduce their dogs to my dogs. And then I'd literally cuddle with dogs. And like, I remember the month of July, because of 4th of July, a lot of people travel. And I made like $1,000 that month just watching dogs, because I had so many in and out through that month. But I was like, this is so fun. And then it did. So that was fun for a while. And then I had some dogs damage parts of my house. And so that was unfortunate. And so it kind of got to where I was like, well, maybe this is more work than it's worth. And so I stopped doing that. But I think I learned a lot from that, and that it doesn't have to be hard. I think before that, marketing was hard. And I was like, oh, if you just go to a platform where your target market already is, they might take a cut. But I didn't mind that they took a cut because they helped me, and it made it so much easier to find those people.
Sure.
And it was a trusted site, and they had insurance. So if something happened, they would help provide for that. So there are a lot of benefits for working for that. Mm-hmm. And then I was still like, I started a blog and that did okay. But then I learned about Etsy. I actually took an Etsy course to learn about it. And I'd never heard really of digital products on Etsy. I thought it was all handmade stuff, but it was a podcaster actually that I'd followed for a long time, and I trusted her. And so I was like, oh, that seems interesting. Let me just see what this is all about. And so I took her course. I actually took her course and a blogging course at the same time. So I did the Etsy course, created a few products, listed them. They made a couple bucks a day maybe, or a couple bucks a month. And then I switched to blogging. And so the Etsy store was just operating in the background because blogging takes a long time to build up. And then I was trying to do both, but I was working full time at this time too. So it was a lot. And then I was pregnant at that time, I think, or I was either pregnant, I think it was 2019. So I had a little kid, a baby as well, like a 6-month-old.
Wow.
And so I was like, this is a lot. And I was working full time. So I just kind of let it kind of go down, and I wasn't blogging every day, and I wasn't posting new items to Etsy. Then I got pregnant again, and I was really kind of sad that I had let my goals kind of go by the wayside, because it's this up and down. Like, you have not enough time, but then you don't spend time on your goals. And then you're like, oh, well, I really I enjoyed that. I'm never going to reach my big goal if I'm not spending time on it. And so when I was on maternity leave with my daughter, I really was looking at all the different side hustles I had. And I was like, which one could I really go deep into? Because I'm probably spreading myself too thin. I need to focus, which I think a lot of people that start side hustles do. And I think it's okay. You're learning, right? So you're trying to figure out what you're good at, what you like. And so I assessed everything, and Etsy was making like $50 a month, even though I wasn't spending sometimes some months any time. It was just happening automatically. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. What if I really invested time into learning this and really figuring it out? So I spent a couple of months just studying and going through the course that I had taken and trying to read any blog posts that I could about growing it. And within, I would say, I think it was like 1 or 2 months, it really started to take off. So I was like an average of $50 a month. And then it went to like $700 a month. I think it was like $680 or $690. And then the month after that, it was like 60, I think it was $4,500. It's like, wow. I can't really, don't quote me on these. I have a blog post where I talk about but it happened really fast once I focused. And I think, the other thing I talked about earlier is confidence. And so around that time period, like from when I started my Etsy store to when it really started to take off, I had been studying positive psychology at Claremont Graduate University. So that was the other thing, having a kid, working full time. I was also a grad student in positive psych because I got tuition remission as a benefit. Okay. So I was studying that, but I think that really helped me boost my confidence and change my mindset to have more of a growth mindset, to where instead of thinking things like, oh, I don't have enough time and making excuses, I would say, or like, oh, I'm not good at that. I don't know how to do this. I would think, okay, other people are successful. They know something I don't know. What can I learn from them? what do I need to learn to get to where I need to be? And I think shifting my mindset in that kind of a way really helped me. Instead of making an excuse and just being like, yeah, I should give up, I'd be like, no, I need to go harder, and I need to, that the information exists, it's out there, I just need to learn more.
Well,
And
it sounds like you really switched your thinking from here's all the reasons I can't do it to, instead of why can't I, to here's all the reasons I can. And sometimes oftentimes they're harder to come up with those ways to do it. But if we go with that mindset of there is a solution, I can do this. Like you said, other people have done it. So there's a path there that I can follow. I just got to find my path to it.
Exactly. And I think that was a big switch for me. And so once that happened, then things really started to take off.
And at some point you decided to quit your full-time job.
Yeah. So that was the beginning, was the like $600 to $700 a month. And then it pretty steadily went up from there. And so I remember after a couple months going to my husband and be like, I can quit my job. Like, it's replacing my full-time income. And he was like, it could be seasonal. Like, are you sure? And I think we are risk adverse and we have these big financial goals. And so I was like, okay, fair. I was excited, but at the same time, I was like, yeah, I should really stick with this. So he's like, give it a year just to see what happens. And so that was a really good year because I basically had 2 full-time incomes. And so that was really awesome. But it was about 9 months. And then I was like, look, it's been 9 months. It's close enough to a year. And he's like, yeah, okay, fair. It's not seasonal. Like, I think you have something here. So I put in my notice, and my boss was like, oh, like, can you stay a little longer? So I was managing it already, working full time as well. So I gave her a full month. It was a month or 6 weeks notice.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I was able to do that. And then it was the June of 2021 that I quit my full-time job to do this full time.
And what were you earning at Etsy at that point?
Oh, I think that year it was 160,000.
That's quite the growth. And what were you selling?
So it's digital products. It's anything from like things that moms would want, like a scavenger hunt printable or something like that. It can be around like Easter, Christmas, the big holidays that people are looking for entertainment. And then I do a lot of templates for business owners. So it can be social media posts or things like that. But things that help people save time or money, whether it's kind of a mom, somebody that's a mom like I am, or somebody that's a business owner that's looking for something.
Yeah. Well, the majority of Etsy sellers aren't making 6 figures like you are.
Right.
To what do you attribute your success?
So I think not giving up is a huge one. And if people listening to this might roll their eyes, because I get it, when you're doing something and it's not working and somebody tells you to not give up, it feels like, it's like, am I just going to do this forever if it's not going to be successful? So right. I think you have to not give up, but you also can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? I think, was it Einstein? I think he gets attributed to that, but that's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing, expecting different results. So I think having a growth mindset, which I talked about, and learning, like, one way you can do this is find people. If there's a course or something and somebody that's been where you want to be, invest in yourself, buy from them. Some people have the excuse of not having enough money, fair, but there's YouTube videos that you can watch. There's blogs that you can read. I mean, textbooks. Like, I've started doing this. I think once I learned like how powerful learning is, I think that is just a huge difference for people. And you can literally buy textbooks. They're not that much. And there's so much information. Like, PhDs are writing these, and there's not PhDs in Etsy, but there's business strategies that relate to Etsy and things like that. So I think just trying to broaden your horizons, you can buy textbooks, and then you don't even have to take a college class. And if you literally just invest the time to read those, that's powerful. But also use your library. Like, you can go to the library, you can find really rich information on all kinds of subjects. And I think instead of telling yourself like, I don't know how to market something, it's like, okay, you don't know marketing, start there. Let's Google marketing textbooks, Google best marketing books, go on YouTube and just type marketing 101. Like, you have to start somewhere. And so I think starting at the beginning, and then as a question comes up and you're like, oh, that seems interesting, how do I do that? Then you kind of go down that rabbit hole and test something, and maybe it works for you. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, then you can say like, okay, maybe this isn't the best bet. And then you kind of make the decision, am I going to go harder and deeper into that? Or am I going to abandon that strategy and pick a different one? And so I think it's just constantly testing and learning and seeing if things are working or not. And I think like thinking like a scientist is really helpful, and tracking your data too. Because I think some people will throw everything at the wall and something works, and they tried 10 different things, and then they're like, which one worked? And then they have to keep doing all 10 things. But I think like if you have a blog or a website, set up Google Analytics on it so that you can get data on the back end. Like, even just keeping an Excel sheet of like, today, this is the big thing I worked on and I posted it here. and then in tomorrow or a week from now, seeing what the results on the back end are.
Right.
And you can say like, okay, which one led to that, right? And so I like a lot of people don't track that stuff, but then you're always going to be guessing. You're going to be overworking yourself. And then when you find something that works, it's going to take a while, but when you find something that works, just go hard into that and just keep doing that same thing.
That makes so much sense. And when you do come across something that maybe intrigues you and you want to do, but you don't know how to do it, I think you hit the key question when you said, how do I do this? Not, oh, I can't do that or I don't know, but how do I? And you mentioned the library. I think that is such an underused resource.
Yeah, it totally is. And so you can go to college libraries too. I think that's something that people don't realize. And their librarians will help you. Most librarians have PhDs or doctorate degrees, or usually at the very least grad degrees, and they know how to find information. So sometimes the problem is you don't even know what to search.
Right.
You don't know what the right word is, but you can talk to them and they're really good at figuring out what you need. And then if you know the question, they can like word it a little bit different so that it helps you actually get the resources that you're looking for.
Yeah. You also mentioned that you were working full-time, part-time with Eats part-times with multiple side hustles. You were pregnant. You already had an infant, but you mentioned finding time to do this. Was there a specific strategy you had around that or a time of day? Like you had a full schedule, girl.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know that anybody's asked it. So it's a really good question. So I think one thing is a lot of people buy courses and they never do them. So that's obviously a big problem. And I think sometimes it can feel overwhelming. It's like, okay, I'll get to it when I have an hour to sit down. And you're never going to have an hour to sit down and focus, especially when you have a toddler and a million things on your plate. And so what I would do is when I was getting ready in the morning, I was putting my makeup on, drying my hair, curling my hair, I would put either my AirPods in or I would have my phone next to me and I would play the videos. And I think the biggest thing is just getting started. And so, because I bought it, then I later, after I figured Etsy out, I was like, okay, maybe I'll create a digital course. And I bought an even more expensive course on creating digital courses. And it took me a while to even get started because I was really overwhelmed. And there was some fear of like, oh, once I get started on this, like, how much time is this going to take? Like, so I get it. I know where people are, but I think literally just put on your calendar, pick a certain time. I think first thing in the morning is helpful, but it depends on your day.
Yes.
And just the goal is like 5 minutes. You just got to get started. And if all you accomplish every day is watching 5 minutes of a video, and if you're not buying a course, maybe it's reading an article on Google or it's watching a YouTube video or something, but just find something and watch it for 5 minutes. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to have more than 5 minutes. And so you'll hit play and you'll be really interested and then you'll get sucked in and then ideas will start spinning. You'll have a lot of fun, but it's that getting started. That's the hardest part. So I think don't focus on anything else. Just focus on getting started. Then you can spend an hour. And I think it's just building the habit. And so once you just get that first day down of at least 5 minutes, and you'll probably get way more than that in, you take some notes. And then the next day you just try to do that and literally try to do that for the first week. And after a week, you have a pretty solid foundation of a habit and then just try to keep doing that. So I think step one is just learning. And so figure out what you want to learn, find where your content is, and then schedule a time every day at the very least to get 5 minutes in, to just be thinking a little bit about it. But again, I studied positive psych. So the good thing is your subconscious mind is going to be working on that. So then you do that first thing in the morning, you go to work, you're working on a random project and a random idea might pop up in your head, or You're at a meeting and somebody says something, but there's some weird connection in your brain that relates to your side hustle. So you write that down. So there's a lot of stuff that it's just feeding your brain, right? And so I think that's the learning side of it. And then once you learn enough, eventually I feel like you're going to get so excited with what you're learning that you can't help but put it to action. And so those 5 minutes might shift a little bit to where, okay, now instead of just learning, I'm going to start brainstorming. And you just start with an idea. And then once you have an idea, then it's like, okay, how am I going to turn this idea into an actual thing? And then once you have an actual thing, then you have to post it. And along all of those stages, if you have questions like, oh, how do I post it on Etsy? You can Google it. You can find an answer. And the other thing underlying all of this goes back to the positive psych, I think, is just having a growth mindset again and having confidence. And so if you're going to get scared, there's at some point you're going to reach a point where it's outside of your comfort zone. You're like, I've never done this before. And so courses, I think, are helpful because sometimes people take you behind the scenes and are like, literally, this is what it looks like. Like I tested Facebook ads about a month ago, and that really intimidated me for a long time. And I watched a video on it and somebody took me behind the scenes and I watched them and I was like, oh, that's not so bad. It's not as scary as I thought it was. So I
Nice.
think having things like that to inspire you and just kind of calm your nerves down a little bit is really helpful. And if you don't have that, then you just have to push yourself and do it and be okay with failure. And I think the other thing is knowing that failure, there's no such thing as failure in a way, it's just data. And so if you are putting yourself out there and people don't like it, or you get negative comments, or even if there's like nobody buys it or something like that, that's just data. And it's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't keep doing that thing because it's not working. And then you can try something else. But if you never put it out there, I know a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs and they spend years building something and they never put it out there. And then they could die having never put it out there and never saw it if it worked, or they put it out there and then nobody likes it or uses it. And how many years did they spend when they could have just put a crappy first draft up and got the data right away and been like, oh, nobody likes this. Or on the other hand, they could have put a crappy first draft out and people are like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And then that really inspires and boosts their confidence. And then they go hard at that thing so much faster because it's like, oh my gosh, people want this. I better get it out.
Mm-hmm. My very first podcast guest, he talked about that his key message was, number one, you got to be willing to fail, and you've got to be willing to fail in public.
Yes.
And when you think about it, any rock star, any superstar in their field, they always had that first speech that they did, or the first Etsy item they created, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And it's not like they were this incredible success from day one. They had all that, as you put it, data along the way to tweak what they were doing to improve it.
And it's less scary. Once you get the first thing out, like the first Etsy things I put out are terrible. And I look at them and I just laugh. I put something out the other day and it had an error, like in the listing image, a typo. Luckily, one of my customers like pointed it out to me. I was like, oh, thank you. I was like, that's embarrassing. But I'm like, you know what? It didn't stop me from making money. And that's so right. I think I want to share that with people because it's like, even I mess up. Like, you do not have to be perfect. You just have to put it out there. And that's one thing I like about Etsy and digital products is it's not like you ship something and then it's broken or you're going to have this terrible reputation. Like, you can quickly, if people see it, they can just message you and say, hey, this is wrong. And then you're like, oops, sorry, let me fix it. You fix it for them. And it was that easy. It takes you a couple minutes. There's a quote, I don't know who it's by, but it's basically, if you're not embarrassed by your beta version, you launch too late. And so I really try to remember that, because you just have to get it out there and get data and move on from there.
And if there is fear, which there will be, to push through it if it's something that you want.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
When you see that goal of retiring by the age of 40, it's like, yeah, this is worth it.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I call it moving from your comfort zone to your panic zone. Mm-hmm. It's brand new territory. But then once you play in that panic zone enough, then that becomes the new comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, just on the other side of that is your new panic zone every time you grow, right?
Exactly. And I lift weights. And I just started doing that not that long ago. And I think that's a good analogy. If you just are constantly lifting the same weight, you're not going to grow. And so the other thing you don't want to do is, I love this example, is like, if you walked into the gym and you're like, okay, I want to get stronger, and you just walked all the way to the heaviest weights and tried to lift them up, they wouldn't even budge, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you stop there and like just gave up, you're not going to grow. Like, so I think that is a tangible example. And it's so helpful because it's common sense that you're not just going to walk in. Like, I'm not going to go pick up 200-pound dumbbells and lift them. Like, people look at me and they're like, Rachel, that's not possible for you. It's not. It could be in the future, yes, but I got to start small. And so I think that's the other thing people see, due to like a mistake people make, is they look at people that have been in the field, whatever they want to achieve, for 20 years or 10 years or something. And they're like, yeah, I want to do what that person is doing. I want to achieve that. And it's like, okay, well, let's start at the beginning. Like, you can't just jump in and expect to be able to do all the things that they're doing, because it takes time to build up your portfolio, your experience, your knowledge. Right. So start at the beginning, work your way up. There will be tons of learning, and then eventually you'll get to that goal.
Yeah. Like, the person listening may not upload their first printable on Etsy and make $160,000 a year.
Probably
there is so much work and effort and study and learning and tweaking that you did behind the scenes to get to that 100%. Point.
And one point I want to make too. So when I first launched, I would make a couple sales a month, maybe if I was lucky, a couple sales a week. I didn't make my first total above 100 sales on Etsy until I was 9 months in. And I've seen people do it in like a month. So it's possible to do it quickly. For me, it didn't happen that way. But then now I literally had days where I make over 100 sales in one single day. And so like, it's possible, it can change, but there's a lot of foundational skills that you have to learn to get to that point. And there's really not a shortcut to learning those things.
So before we leave the Etsy conversation,
Mhm.
in 2019, I understand there was about 2.7 million sellers, and that ballooned in 2021 to 7.5, something crazy like that, million sellers.
Probably, yeah.
Even with a great product, you can be hard to see. So what's your advice
Mhm.
for someone starting out? Like, how do they even get noticed in this huge ocean of products out there?
That's a great question. So I think there's tools that you can use to figure out what keywords you should use. So there is definitely a huge SEO game that you have to play for the algorithm to see you. And so a mistake a lot of people make, and one that I made too, is I would just type in, like, if I created a budget tracker, I would type in budget tracker and budget and personal finance. And I would just make things up that I thought people were searching for, but it wasn't based on data. And so once I started making data informed decisions, using tools like eRank is a great tool where you're able to see the keywords and what the search volume is and what the competition is. Then you can start to really see what keywords you should use. And the secret is that you have to find, and it's not easy to find, but if you can, this is really helpful. Find a keyword that has search volume and not a ton of competition. Because,
Right.
for example, if I type in birthday card, it's probably like hundreds of thousands, if not a million competition. It's insane. And so the other thing, if people know what a long tail keyword is, like birthday card, you're going to have birthday card for 60-year-olds and you're going to have birthday card for 5-year-old. And so it's also thinking about what the consumer is searching for. So if you are creating a birthday card that's funny and it's for a 5-year-old, if you just put birthday card, then all those customers that are looking for every single age of birthday card is going to see it. And it's just kind of a waste.
Yes.
Whereas if you put 5-year-old birthday card, funny for boy, something like that, like that's very much more specific, and that's going to narrow down the search a lot. And there's more buyer intent with long tail keywords. So if you just think about you as a consumer, if you're looking for a new blouse, you might go in and type like blouse, right? Just to start. And then you get so many different options, like different colors, different styles. And you're just like, oh, okay, I want a black blouse. And then it's going to narrow it down. And then you realize I want a black blouse that's long sleeved. And so you keep honing in your search until you get something that's much closer to what you're looking for. And then that's where you're actually going to buy something. Most people, if they typed in blouse, aren't going to just pick the first item and say like, yes, I want that thing.
Correct.
There's a low chance that that's going to be what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But when you get into that long tail, like you're fully describing the exact thing that you want, whoever's popping up for that, you're going to have a better chance of getting the sell. And so that's another important thing to get found on Etsy, is to use those long tail keywords.
Yeah. And a lot of side hustle people out there know that SEO is something that they have to pay attention to and aren't. So this could be another motivation or launching step to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you have such a beautiful, well built out website. And I just finished an interview actually with an SEO expert. And when I looked at your site, it seems that you're doing so many things right in that regard, from the branding, from the SEO elements, affiliate links. Tell me about the transition in your thinking from a single Etsy shop to branching out to these other products and services you now offer, because your site is not about printables.
Exactly. So I think what I learned selling digital products on Etsy is that there's a market for digital products. And so like I had that CNBC article go out and I mentioned the course that I took. And so I did make affiliate income from that. And so I was like, oh, interesting. One, you can make money from courses, and then courses are just another example of a digital product, but they're sold at a higher level. And you're usually you're solving a bigger problem for them. And so I was like, okay, you solve problems for people, and you make more money potentially. And so I was like, I like that business model, and I'm already doing something similar. So it's just kind of the next level. We talked about raising the bar and like growing your skills. So Etsy was a beginning for me, and I figured that out. And now it's like, okay, what's the next step? So I think just online marketing and making passive income on the internet is something that I'm interested in. And so that's kind of a pivot that I'm making. So I have my Etsy store, that's a foundation, but then how can I lead people to solutions I'm constantly out there learning, taking courses, and sometimes I find good courses, sometimes I find not as good courses. So when I truly believe in something and it helps make a difference in my life, I fully am okay with promoting those to other people, because it can really help them change their life. And it can also help me make money. And so I appreciate that. So that's the affiliate marketing side. And then I've also created a course. So part of my journey, the course that I took is very tactical, like helps you figure out the SEO strategy, and it's a great networking group too. They have a Facebook group. And so there's kind of this mastermind where people are sharing kind of best practices and what's working, what's not working. So that's really helpful. And I think it's inspiring as well. Like when I went through my process, when I slowed down on Etsy, I stopped paying attention to the group. And then when I started to boost it back up, I went in and some people that I had started the course with had really blown up. And so I was like, if they did it and they started when I do, that was one of the motivations. I was like, then I can do it. And so I would study what they were doing. I would try to learn from them and things like that. So
this is the Etsy course.
The Etsy course that I took. Yeah. So I think it's helpful to have, and sometimes you get in your head and you're like, oh, this just isn't possible. But when you go into a Facebook group and you see people being successful every day, I think it helps inspire you. And so that can help you get out of your head too. But the one thing that they don't cover is the confidence and the fear and getting over kind of that negative self-talk and things like that. And I think I'm pretty sure that I'm their number one student. And so that is the one thing that I had that nobody else had, was that I was studying positive psychology.
Right.
And so I took everything that I learned in positive psych, and that's what I put into my course. And I think it can work for somebody that is trying to do an Etsy store, but I think it can work for anybody who has a big goal, whether it's wanting to work out and lose weight or gain muscle, or wanting to start just any kind of business on their own. It's basically, here's a big goal. Most people don't have a ton of time. They might not have as much money as they need to invest in it. And they probably have some limiting beliefs, negative self-talk, things like that are holding them back. And so in my course, I try to address those things and then leverage positive psychology to help them get past those and kind of move forward in their life.
What's the name of the course and where do they find it?
So if you just go to my website, you can find more information. I call it Optimize Your Life Academy. So it talks about time management. So like, how do you achieve success? Like whatever your goal is, how do you get there? But the positive psych side is, how do you also be happy? I think positive psychology, in a lot of ways, it teaches people how to be happy and thrive. And so I think you can grind it out and just like only figure out what your goal is and only focus on that, but you might not be happy with your life and have positive experiences and joy. And like, I'm a mom, so I don't want to just focus on my business and never see my children. Right. And so I tried to bring both of those things together. Like, you can have a really good life and enjoy what you're doing, what you're working on, have time for family and friends, and also achieve your big goals. And so that's what I put in the course.
Awesome. And remind us again of the website address.
So you can start at moneyhackingmama.com. I have a free webinar that teaches people about confidence and the 3 secret strategies to help them optimize their life. So that's a great portal in to learn more about the course. And it's free, so you can watch that webinar and then it will give you more information about the course as well.
And I love the free offers because it gives somebody an opportunity to connect with you too and see if you two are a fit.
Exactly.
I used to do that in my seminars a lot, free evenings before a weekend or week-long event I would do, because that way you know the people you've connected with, they sign up, you're guaranteed to have a terrific course as a result of that.
Yeah, definitely.
I can see on your website your expertise in blogging come through. And you mentioned the SEO and affiliate links. Have you created that gorgeous website, or did you bring in help to do that?
It's mostly myself. I've hired like people from a Fiverr occasionally when it's like gets beyond what I can do. But yeah, I would say 95% of it has just been me. Like, I work basically a 9-to-5 schedule, kind of a traditional schedule, Monday through Friday. But within that, a lot of it is working on marketing my course. So I would say like half of one day, maybe I'm working on my Etsy store. And I do have a VA that helps me with my Etsy store. So a lot of it is just reviewing their work and managing that. And then everything else has been trying to build the passive income side from the blogging perspective and then the course perspective. So and then it's just learning too. Like, I'm constantly learning and figuring things out. But my husband, I say it's 9 to 5, but then I take like 2-hour lunch breaks and go play pickleball.
Right.
Sometimes my husband, he still works full time, and he's just like, have you done any work today? I'm like, I'm noodling. I'm working on a blog post idea while I play pickleball. Like, I'm in the zone. This is how your subconscious mind works. And I think he's just like, okay, sure. So in some ways, I'm always working on my business. And in other ways, it might not look like I am.
Right. It's kind of nice sometimes when you have that blur between work and play.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like right now, this is technically work for you and I.
Yeah.
But I'm loving our conversation.
Same.
Right?
Yeah. And that's why I think there's a quote that's like, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, or something like that. And I feel that way. And so it's like, I'm just kind of playing all the time. But I do, like, again, going back to the positive psychology, I studied flow, and there's so much, if you just do where, like, what your strengths are, what you're really good at and what you enjoy, I think like you can 10x your results. Whereas a lot of people grind and like, oh, I don't like doing this. And so then they're checking their phone constantly and they're not in the zone, and it's just things don't flow as easily.
Yeah.
And so if you can really find that sweet spot, you can just get so many, like your results are so much faster and easier. And you don't even realize that you're working because you're just having fun.
And often it does take all those trials and errors first to even get to that place to know what you really sync up with.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
It started with you with that printable Etsy, and look what you've created now. And I do want to ask you what the website is contributing to your revenue per month. Do you have like a goal for it, or maybe comment on that?
For the Etsy store?
No, for the basically everything that the website generates.
Everything else. Yeah, I would say that varies. And so like I launched my course in January. We're in March right now. And so I did that with an affiliate partner and it made around $6,000. And so my goal is to definitely get that well over $10,000. And then with affiliate marketing, like that, I would say is a couple $1,000, but it just kind of goes up and down.
Sure. Per year or per month?
Per month. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to grow that, but everything, it's just kind of like this consistent. And then it's just like, okay, I got something consistent. Now, how can I make that bigger? Like, what can I do without spending a ton of time? What's working? How can I double down on that and do more of that? And then I do some freelance writing as well, where I have time. But yeah, I'm always kind of testing different products and services. And again, it's just test, learn, whatever works, repeat, whatever doesn't work, abandon, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Would you mention that you wanted to hit a certain revenue and net worth goal by age of 40? How old are you now?
35.
35. Oh, lots of time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're good. Yeah. We have some like real estate investing, and we have I think we started our financial independence retire early path in 2015. So we're 8 years in of saving 50% or more of our income. So like we're pretty good.
That's terrific.
Yeah. And here's a fun hack, because I'm Money Hacking Mama, is you can actually get paid to write your own story, which people might not know. So I said I do some freelance writing. I pitched Business Insider and I asked them if I could write the article, and they were like, yeah. And I was able to include, like, get a backlink, get publicity for myself, but they also paid me to do it. So yeah, think differently, put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to ask.
How perfect is that? Because the article, you would have been writing it in third person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it saves them time because they don't have to interview me, and you can control the story a little bit. So that's helpful. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Terrific idea. Well, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Rachel?
Yeah, I think if you want to learn more, you can go to moneyhackingmama.com. Okay. I have a bunch of freebies on there. If you want to put some links in the show notes, I can send you some. One Absolutely. People might like specifically is I have a passive income checklist that I just created. So it basically walks you through the initial steps of creating a passive income product. It's completely free. So I'll give you the link to that. I think it's pages.moneyhackingmama.com/checklist. Or you can just go to Money Hacking Mama and see all my other freebies. And I'm on Instagram. There's some content on there. I'm working other angles, so I'm not posting a lot. Okay. But when I do post things, you can follow me there and you'll be able to see it.
Perfect. Rachel, you've accomplished so much on a number of different fronts, some of them coming together just beautifully. You had a lot going on every step of the way, yet you managed to find time to do it. What's your best tip for helping people take action on their side hustle?
Yeah, I think big tip coming from a psychological perspective is try not to make excuses. So our brains are so powerful and they're such amazing problem solvers. But if you make an excuse, you kind of take it off of their plate in a way. So if you say like, I want to achieve X, you know what your goal is. And then you say, but I don't have time. Then your brain's going to be like, great, I don't have to think about that problem because you just made an excuse for it. And so it's just going to like take all that energy and put it on some other thing that is possible. On the other hand, if you say, time is a challenge for me, like you can reword it slightly. I need to figure this out. It's a problem I need to figure out. And you don't even have to come up with a solution actively in your brain. But if you just reword it or think about it ever so slightly differently in your head, your brain's going to start working on that problem and trying to spit out a solution for you. You might wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning and it's like, this is what you have to do. You just have to delegate this and then your whole life will be better. And so I think stop making excuses, because it takes your brain off the hook and it's not going to solve those problems for you. So instead, ask different questions, ask better questions, and you're going to get a lot better output from your mind, and it's going to help you achieve your goals, as opposed to telling you it's not possible and then giving your ego an excuse to just stop.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your tips, hacks, insider knowledge, and of course, for being today's Side Hustle Hero.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
When Rachel talked about how absurd it would be for her to go into the gym on day one and try and lift 200 pounds, it took me back to my days as a competitive bodybuilder. I was living and training in a small mountain town, and I was the only one in the gym, the only one in the town actually, who had aspirations of competing. So I was really on my own. I was getting information from books, TV, and any bodybuilding magazines I could get my hands on. Yeah, that was a while ago. The point is, my only examples of bodybuilders were the pros. Since no one around me was training like me, my only frame of reference was what I saw in books and in the media. So trying to figure out when I should jump into my first competition was a bit daunting. While I was pretty ripped, I was nowhere near the size of a Ms. Olympia, which was the top bodybuilding competition. But at one point I figured I just need to take the plunge, just go for it. And at the very least, it would be a great learning experience, which it was. It was a real eye-opener because, as it turned out, the other competitors were just like me, more my size, not the Mr. and Ms. Olympias I was seeing in the magazines. And my fellow competitors were having the same pre-contest nightmares, pre-contest challenges that I was experiencing. So today, what your social media and ads are showing you are the business versions of the Mr. and Ms. Olympia, the 6- and 7-figure success stories, and people traveling around the world as money drops effortlessly into their bank accounts. You could look at that and feel the distance between you and them is so vast. But as Rachel pointed out, she started from scratch and built it up over time. You're only hearing about her now because of the time and effort and learning and actions that she's taken. Simply reading a book or talking about going to the gym isn't going to build those muscles. But if you take action consistently and slowly increase the weight over time, you will be in awe at the changes that take place, both in your body and your business. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find a link to Rachel's website and the resources she mentioned in the show notes and on our website, sidehustleheropodcast.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the show, on the guests, how this podcast is helping you. What areas could we do better? Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @joanposivy. Thanks for listening, and hustle on.